So let's get started with the third of our stage of the maintaining of the cost accounts. So what happens in this stage? Let's read it. Let's read it from the notes. So what happens in this stage is that production overheads are absorbed. So very short line. So after going through the chapter of the overheads, we learned that how are the cost accounts. We learned how are the overheads are absorbed. So they are absorbed in the four stages. The first stage is allocation, and the second stage is apportionment. The third stage is reapportionment, and finally absorption. So after going through all of these stages, production overheads are absorbed into the units of the production. Right. So these are the stages related to the absorption of the overheads. So after going through all of these stages, the production overheads are absorbed. So what is the double entry for it? How does this relate to the cost account? So let's see. You should remember that work in progress account. What does it do? What is the function that work in progress account performs? So let's read it here. The work in progress account or cost of production account is same thing. So same two names for one account, right? So work in progress and cost of production, these are two names of one account. So what function does it perform? It gets total production cost for every year. Total production cost, we have to note this word, that the word written is total production cost. Before the third stage, what are the costs that we are debiting? We are transferring to the work in progress account. These are the direct costs. So does this mean that work in progress account only gathers the direct cost? No. It is written here that total it gathers total production cost. So it means what else is remaining if we have already debited the direct costs? So what else is remaining? The production overheads are remaining. So now in the third stage, we have to debit all the production overheads that were gathered in the production overhead account. In this account, we have to transfer them also to the work in progress account. So let's mention this graphically. So what happens is that production overheads, all the production overheads that were transferred to the production overhead account will then be transferred to the work in progress account. So what is being transferred here in the work in progress account? These are the production overheads. Now, does all production overheads gets transferred? No. You have to remember that the amount of production overhead that gets transferred to the work in progress account is the overhead absorbed amount. Is the overhead absorbed amount, not actual overheads. The production overhead account, let's read the definition for it here. So what does production overhead account do? It gathers total actual production overheads for a period. So listen carefully. In the production overhead account, what is being debited? Actual production overheads are being debited to the production overhead account. So actual production overheads are being gathered in the production overhead account. What is now being transferred to the work in progress account is the overhead absorbed amount. This is not equal to actual overheads. What is the difference between overhead absorbed and actual overheads? In the overhead chapter, if you have studied, you must remember that the difference between overhead absorbed amount and the actual overheads is known as over under absorption. So the difference that now remains the production overhead account is the over under absorption. So where does this go? Does this stay in the production overhead account? No, this is not the case. This gets transferred to the cost of sales account. So let's draw this. So I have used the opposite arrow. You can say that what I have written, what I have drew now, it seems like, of course, that something is being transferred from the cost of sales account to the production overhead account. So yeah, this is the case. Actually, over absorption gets transferred from the cost of sales account to production overhead account. Why? Because this is reduction in expense. Cost of sales account, you will see later that it gathers the cost that you can say expense related to the unit sold. So this expense that we have recognized in the cost of sales account related to the unit sold is now being reduced by the over absorption amount, right? So over absorption is transferred to the production overhead account. And the under absorption, what happens if under absorption, if we have under absorbed the overheads? The under absorption is transferred to the cost of sales account. Let me just pause this video. We'll resume in a minute. Right. So I was saying that the under absorption that is transferred to the if we have incurred under if we have under absorbed the overheads, then under absorption is transferred to the cost of sales account. So now with the use of the arrows, you can easily see that what is being debited to where. So you can now easily translate the double entries from this, from just looking at this diagram. So the first entry for this stage is we are doing the 15th transaction, right? And yeah, one thing to note is that if you won't be able to fully understand this concept, this stage three, if you have not done the chapter of the overheads. So this is related to the chapter of the overheads. So make sure you have to do that chapter before you are you will be able to understand this, right? So now let's do the 15th transaction. So here's the notes here. So 15 transaction, allocation, apportionment, reapportionment, finally absorption of overheads were performed, right? So overhead absorbed were 31,600. How were they calculated? These were calculated as OER multiplied by actual activity level, if you remember. So the amount is given to us. So 31,600. Where would this be transferred to? These would be transferred to the work in progress account. So transfer means debited to. So the double entry would be very simple, very straightforward. Of course, we will be debiting the work in progress account and crediting the production overhead accounts. From where this amount 31,600 is coming from, this is coming from the production overhead account. So very easy, very straightforward double entry. So let's do this in the, let's post this entry to the call to the T accounts that we have made. So we have to debit the work in progress with 31,600. So 31,600, and here we have to write production overheads because these have come from the production overhead account. So yeah, so now note this that work in progress account on the debit side, all the production overheads cost are being gathered, right? Oh, I think I missed this last transaction, independent contractor fee. So I have to write this also there. Yeah, I missed it here. So independent contractor fee should also be written here. Independent contractor fee. So it was 2000. This was from the last class. So production overheads are also now debited to the work in progress account. Now let's come to the production overhead account. So we have to credit them by $31,600. We have to write the name of the opposite account, and that is work in progress. So now let's look at the balance on both of the sides of the production overhead account. So on the debit side, the balance is let's just sum it 31,300, and here it is 32,000. So now closing balance, you can say the balance where on which side would it come? It would come on the debit side, right? So now you have to remember this thing that whenever the balance comes on the debit side of the production overhead, then we have to then it is over absorption. So we have to write 600 here, right? No, 700. So 700. So we have to debit the production overhead by 700. So in what case the production overhead is debited? In the case of over absorption. So the double entry would be debiting. You can write it as 15A and this as 15B. The next transaction as 15B. Next part of this transaction. So 15B, once we have debited the work in progress with the overhead absorbed amount, then obviously the some balance remains on the production overhead account that would be called as over or under absorption. So if the balance is on the debit side, then that means over absorption has incurred because production overhead account now need to be debited. So we have to write it as debit production overhead account and credit. So where does it coming from? It is coming from the cost of sales account. So we have to credit the cost of sales account. So with the amount of the difference, which is 700. So this double entry is performed if over absorption has occurred. If over absorption. If under absorption, I can just write this entry here. If under absorbed, if overheads are under absorbed, then the double entry will be debit cost of sales because we have now increased our expense. We have recognized the expense in the cost of sales account. So our expense has increased, and from where it is coming from, it's coming from the production overhead account. So this is the double entry if under absorption is occurred. So under absorption would be shown on the credit side of the production overhead account. So the balance would come here rather than this side. So what should we write in here? With 700, we have to write the cost of sales account because that was the account that was being credited. So now let's go to the cost of sales account. We haven't cost of sales account made yet. So cost of sales account. What should we write in here? We should write, we have to, we were crediting it. Yeah, right. We were crediting it because the overheads were over absorbed. So by 700. So where does this coming from? Where is it getting transferred to? It's getting transferred to the production overhead account, right? So we will recognize the expense, the cost of sales here on the debit side, and these costs are now reduced by 700, which were the over absorbed of the overheads. So this is this was the third stage. So very easy, very simple, but yet very important. If you just remember this diagram, if you just remember the diagram that I have made here, this concept becomes so much easier to you because this transaction is very important and this can get very confusing. So it is important to just draw this concept. That is why I have also included this diagram here unfilled for you to prepare on it, right? So you have to just draw it here. So this is the best way to learn a concept. So the one thing you need to remember is that the arrow, the direction of the arrow, uh, tells which account is being debited to. So the direction of the arrow is the debit direction. So for example, over absorption is being debited to the production overhead account, and from where the arrow is coming from, that account would be credited. So yeah, this was the stage, a very important stage, very important stage. So this was all. I will for the remaining stages, I will make another video. So we'll meet in the next video, inshallah. Allah Hafiz.